January 12, 1943, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Riverside Public Bathhouse on Liberty Avenue, 11:34 a.m. Bathhouse attendant Lucille Whitmore was mopping the floor in the women's section when she noticed a drop of blood on the tile. Then another. A third. The trail led to a bench near the frosted window, where a young woman of about 25 sat wrapped in a towel. Her back was covered in bruises, fresh purple ones and older yellow-green marks forming a map of violence stretching back months. Lucille approached closer. The woman flinched, instinctively covering her ribs with her palms. Quote, zero quote, she said without looking up. Quote, one quote. Lucille said nothing. After 11 years working at the bathhouse, she'd learned to recognize lies. Bruises from falls are random. These were systematic. Ribs, shoulder blades, lower back, places easily hidden under clothes. "My name's Dorothy," the woman added quietly. "Dot. Sorry about the blood." "Don't worry about it," Lucille sat down beside her. "When did you fall?" "Day before yesterday." Lucille could see the mark on her right shoulder. It wasn't more than a day old. Dot shook her head. Lucille nodded and returned to her buckets. She didn't ask more. It wasn't the first time women came to the bathhouse with such marks, and it wasn't the first time they defended the men who hurt them. Dot returned a week later. A new bruise under her left eye, covered with thick powder. Then again a week after that, abrasions on her wrists, as if someone had held her by force. Each time the same story. Fell, bumped into something, turned awkwardly. "Please don't tell anyone," Dot whispered after her fourth visit, when Lucille was treating a split on her lip. "If people find out, it'll get worse. Vernon's a respected man at the plant. Everyone knows him, and I'm nobody." Lucille Whitmore was born June 3, 1917 in Pittsburgh to a construction worker and a nurse. She finished 8th grade and started working at Riverside Bathhouse right after school in September 1932 at 15. First as a cleaner, then as an attendant. By January 1943, when she first saw Dot, she had over 10 years of daily observation of human bodies behind her. She could read them like others read newspapers. February was cold. More visitors came. The old tenements weren't heating well. People came here to warm up. Lucille noticed 3 more women with similar marks. One was pushing 40, thin, with frightened eyes. Bruises on her thighs, finger marks on her neck. Another about 30, heavy-set, quiet. A nose broken long ago that healed crooked. A fresh contusion on her stomach. The third about 20, barely more than a girl. A knocked-out front tooth, scratches on her chest. All 3 came regularly. All 3 avoided conversation. All 3 hurried home. The last time Dot came was February 16th, Tuesday. A bruise on her cheekbone, fresh, dark purple. Lucille asked how she was. Dot answered briefly. Quote 13. She washed quickly, dressed, left. Lucille never saw her again. February 23rd, the following Tuesday, Lucille waited for Dot all day. She always came on Tuesdays, at the same time, around noon. But this time she didn't show. Lucille figured maybe she was sick, or maybe her husband wouldn't let her leave. March 2nd, Dot was absent again. March 9th, too. By mid-month, Lucille understood something had happened. She asked other regular patrons. Nobody knew anything. Dot had seemingly vanished. Lucille tried to remember if Dot had said anything about herself. Husband, Vernon Talbot, engineer. Plant, likely one of the defense production facilities. Pittsburgh had several. Address, she'd never mentioned it. Lucille couldn't explain why this troubled her so much. Dot was one of dozens of women who passed through the bathhouse each week. But something in her eyes, in the way she tensed at loud noises, in her whispered, quote 14, it stuck like a splinter. Through an acquaintance who worked at City Hall Records, Lucille learned the Talbot address. a 2-bedroom apartment in a brick building on Grant Street, 3rd floor. March 25th, Thursday, after her shift, Lucille went there. The building entrance was clean, smelled of fresh paint. On the 3rd floor landing stood a baby carriage. Neighbors, apparently. Lucille knocked on the Talbot apartment door. For a long time, nobody answered. Then the lock clicked. In the doorway stood a man of about 30, tall, fit, wearing home slacks and a white undershirt. Pleasant face, neat hair, calm gaze. Nothing threatening. Quote 15, he asked politely. Quote 16, Lucille hesitated. Quote 17, quote 18. The man answered without pause. Lucille turned and walked to the stairs. Her heart pounded. Something was wrong. The man spoke too evenly, too calmly, without annoyance at a stranger at his door, without surprise, as if he'd expected the question and prepared an answer in advance. Outside, Lucille stopped, leaned against the building wall. She needed to think. Dot had spoken of her husband, a respected engineer, nervous, violent. This man seemed composed, almost exemplary. But Lucille had worked with people long enough to know the most terrifying monsters wear the most ordinary faces. She returned to the building, climbed to the 4th floor, and knocked on the neighboring apartment. An elderly woman with a baby in her arms opened. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Dorothy Talbot," Lucille said. "Do you know when she'll be back?" "Dot?" the woman frowned. "Did she go somewhere? I haven't seen her in 2 weeks, that's for sure. Thought she was sick. Did Vernon say she left?" "Yes, to her aunt in Cleveland." "Strange," the woman shook her head. "She never mentioned having an aunt to me. Said she was raised in an orphanage, no family. Maybe I'm mixing things up, of course." Lucille thanked her and left. It was already dark outside. She walked to the streetcar stop thinking. An orphanage. So, no aunt in Cleveland. Which meant Talbot had lied. At home, in her room in a boarding house on 5th Avenue, Lucille lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. She could go to the police. But what would she say? A woman stopped coming to the bathhouse. Her husband says she went to visit an aunt who possibly doesn't exist. That's not a crime. It's not even suspicion, just a feeling, intuition. But the bruises on Dot's back were real. The fear in her eyes was real. And her disappearance was real. The next day, Lucille asked for time off and went to Union Station. She bought a ticket on the train to Cleveland. 6 hours there. She didn't know what she'd look for there, but she had to try. In Cleveland, Lucille spent 3 days. She went to public records offices, to churches, to the Welfare Bureau, looking for a woman with the maiden name Dot might have had. But Dot had never mentioned her maiden name. Lucille tried hospitals. Maybe Dot's aunt had really been ill at some point. Nothing. On the 3rd day, she went to the county clerk's office, explained the situation, looking for an acquaintance's aunt, possibly deceased. The clerk, a woman of about 50, searched through death records for the past 10 years. The clerk ran her finger down the lists, then stopped. Half an hour later, Lucille held a copy of the death certificate for Clara Louise Sutherland, who died May 14, 1938, at age 41. Daughter, Dorothy May Sutherland. Lucille returned to Pittsburgh on April 3rd. Dot's mother had died 5 years ago. So the trip to Cleveland, a lie. Which meant Talbot was hiding something. The next day, Lucille went to the police station on Penn Avenue. The desk sergeant, a man of about 40 with a tired face, listened to her without much interest. "A woman's missing?" he clarified. "I don't know for certain, but her husband says she went to visit her aunt, and her mother died 5 years ago. She has no family." Maybe he meant a different aunt. Step-aunt, perhaps. The neighbor said Dot grew up in an orphanage. Neighbor might not have known. "Do you have a missing persons report from relatives?" "She has no relatives. Her mother died. Her father too, I believe." "Then who's filing the report?" "I am. I'm a witness." Witness to what? The sergeant leaned back in his chair. Ma'am, I understand. But by law, we can't open a case without a report from family or without evidence of a crime. Husband says his wife left town. Maybe she really left. To visit a friend, distant relatives, anywhere. He doesn't have to account to you. But he lied. Let's say he did. Maybe he didn't want strangers poking into family business. That's his right. She had bruises, new ones every week. Did she file a complaint? No. Then there's no case. Look,
I'm sympathetic.
but we can't investigate based on bruises you saw at a bathhouse. Maybe she's clumsy. Maybe she bruises easy. I'm not saying he didn't hit her. Maybe he did. But without her complaint or evidence of a crime, there's nothing I can do. Lucille left the station. On the street, she stood under the gray March sky. Evidence of a crime.
That's what they needed.
Not suspicion, not bruises, not lies. Evidence. She walked home slowly. In her mind, she went over everything she knew about Dorothy Talbot. Orphan. Married to Vernon Talbot, engineer at a defense plant. Lived on Grant Street. Had bruises. Disappeared 3 weeks ago. Husband claims she went to Cleveland to care for a non-existent aunt. At home, Lucille pulled out a notebook, the kind she used for bathhouse supply lists, and began to write. She wrote down everything she remembered about Dot, the dates of her visits, the locations of bruises, the words she'd said. Vernon's a respected man at the plant. Please don't tell anyone. If people find out, it'll get worse. Over the next week, Lucille started asking questions, carefully, casually. She talked to women at the bathhouse. Did anyone know Dorothy Talbot? Had anyone seen her lately? Nobody had. She went to the neighborhood near Grant Street, stopped at the corner grocery, asked the clerk if he knew the Talbots. Sure, I know Vernon, the clerk said. Comes in here most evenings. Buys cigarettes, bread, sometimes a newspaper. Nice enough fellow. Keeps to himself. What about his wife? Her? Haven't seen her in a while. Month, maybe. Used to come in once a week for groceries. Quiet girl. Polite. Did she seem all right? The clerk gave her a look. All right, how? Just, was she happy? Lady, I sell groceries. I don't ask people if they're happy. Lucille tried the building superintendent. An older man with rheumatism, he remembered Dot. Nice tenant, he said. Paid rent on time. Never caused trouble. Haven't seen her in a bit, now you mention it. Vernon said she went to help family somewhere. Cleveland? Might have been. Didn't ask details. Did you ever hear anything from their apartment? Arguments? Shouting? The superintendent's face closed. __quote _68 __. Dead end after dead end. Lucille went to the defense plant where Vernon worked. She couldn't get inside. Wartime security was tight, but she talked to workers on their lunch break outside the gates. Most didn't know Vernon well. He worked in drafting, kept to himself, did his job. One man, older, with graying hair, remembered him. Quote 69, quote 70, quote 71, quote 72, quote 73, quote 74. The man frowned. Quote 75. Quote, but Lucille knew better. The type who causes problems often looks exactly like that. By mid-April, Lucille had filled half the notebook with observations, names, dates. She had a pattern, but no proof. Dot had visited the bathhouse weekly from early January through mid-February. She'd had progressive injuries consistent with domestic violence. She'd vanished. Her husband had lied about where she went. But none of that proved anything criminal. People could lie. Women could leave their husbands. Bruises could have innocent explanations. Lucille needed more. On April 18th, a Sunday, she went to St. Stanislaus Church, the Catholic parish near Grant Street. She sat through Mass, then approached the priest, Father Kowalski, a man in his 60s with kind eyes. Father Kowalski thought, quote 77, quote 78. The priest's expression grew troubled. Have you spoken to the police? They won't act without evidence. And you believe her husband harmed her seriously? Lucille hesitated. I don't know, but something's wrong. She wouldn't just leave. She was afraid of him. Did she tell you that? Not directly, but I could see it. The way she talked about him, the fear in her eyes. Father Kowalski was silent for a moment. Mrs. Whitmore, I understand your concern, but without evidence, there's little anyone can do. Have you considered that perhaps she did leave him? Women do leave difficult marriages, especially now with the war. Many are working, earning money. Perhaps she found the courage to go. Then why would he lie about where she went? Perhaps he's embarrassed. Perhaps he doesn't want people to know his wife left him. Lucille stood. Thank you, Father. Outside the church, she felt the weight of doubt settling in. Was she wrong? Was she seeing evil where there was only ordinary marital unhappiness? Maybe Dot really had left. Maybe she was somewhere safe, starting over. But the blood on the bathhouse floor had been real. The terror in Dot's eyes had been real. That night, Lucille couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the apartment on Grant Street. Vernon Talbot living there alone now. Dot's clothes probably still in the closet. Her hairbrush still on the dresser. Her life erased, but the evidence of it remaining. An idea formed. The next morning, Lucille didn't go to work. She called in sick, first time in 2 years, and took the streetcar to Grant Street. She waited in a coffee shop across from the Talbot building, watching. At 7:45 a.m., Vernon emerged, carrying a lunch pail, wearing work clothes. He walked toward the streetcar stop. Lucille waited 10 minutes, then crossed the street. She climbed to the 3rd floor. The landing was empty. She approached the Talbot door. She'd brought tools, a hairpin, a thin metal file. She'd learned to pick simple locks years ago from her brother who'd been a locksmith before he died in a factory accident. She'd never used the skill for anything like this, until now. The lock was cheap, standard. It took her less than a minute. Inside, the apartment was neat. Too neat. The kind of neat that comes from someone trying to erase something. Living room. Sofa, armchair, radio, bookshelf. Kitchen. Clean dishes stacked, no food on the counter. Bedroom. Bed made perfectly. Bureau drawers closed. Lucille searched methodically. Closet. Vernon's clothes on one side, a few dresses on the other. Women's shoes on the floor. Toiletries in the bathroom. A man's razor, shaving soap, and a woman's hairbrush, face powder, lipstick. Everything suggested Dot had simply stepped out and would return. But there was something off. The woman's things were too organized, too deliberate, as if arranged for show. Lucille opened drawers. In the bedroom bureau, Vernon's clothes, shirts, socks, underwear. In the bottom drawer, women's undergarments, stockings, a nightgown, all folded precisely. In the kitchen, she checked cabinets, dishes, pots, canned goods, ration books, his and hers. The ration stamps in Dot's book had been used through early February, then stopped. Lucille moved to the living room, searched behind books, under cushions. Nothing. Then she noticed the radio. It sat on a side table, an RCA Victor console model. She'd seen Vernon through the window one evening, sitting beside it, listening to news broadcasts. She knelt beside it. Behind the radio, wedged between the table and the wall, was a small notebook, leather-bound, about the size of a prayer book. Lucille pulled it out, opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting, a woman's cursive, neat but shaky in places. January 8th, 1943. He hit me again tonight. Said I overcooked the roast. It was barely pink. He threw the plate at the wall. I cleaned it up. He said sorry later, said he's under pressure at work, the war contracts, long hours. I said I understood. January 15th, 1943. My fault this time. I forgot to buy his cigarettes. He grabbed my arm so hard I thought it would break. There's a bruise shaped like his hand. I'll wear long sleeves. January 22nd, 1943. He says I'm ungrateful. Says other women would be lucky to have a husband with a good job, a nice apartment. Says I'm useless. Can't even give him children. The doctor says there's nothing wrong with me, but Vernon says it's my fault. January 29th, 1943. I'm afraid. He's getting worse. Last night he choked me. Just for a few seconds, but I couldn't breathe. He let go and walked away. Didn't say anything. This morning he acted like nothing happened. The entries continued through February, each one documenting another incident, each one more frightening than the last. The final entry was dated February 14th, 1943, Valentine's Day. He bought me flowers, red roses, said he loved me, said he was sorry for everything. We ate dinner. He was so gentle, like when we first married. I thought maybe things would get better. But tonight, after I washed the dishes, he asked where I'd been Tuesday afternoon. I told him the bathhouse. He said I was lying, said I was meeting someone, a man. I swore I wasn't. He didn't believe me. He hit me so hard I fell. Then he kicked me. I tried to crawl away. He grabbed my hair. I thought he was going to kill me, but he stopped, stood there breathing hard. Then he said, "You're not going anywhere without my permission again." He locked me in the bedroom. I can hear him out there, moving things. I don't know what he's doing. I'm so scared. If anyone finds this, please help me. My name is Dorothy Mae Talbot. I live at 347 Grant Street, apartment 3B, Pittsburgh. Please help me. That was the last entry. Lucille sat on the floor, the notebook in her trembling hands. February 14th. 2 days before Dot's last visit to the bathhouse, which meant Vernon had let her out on February 16th, perhaps to maintain appearances, to make it seem like everything was normal. And then she disappeared for good. Lucille stood. She needed to take this to the police. This was evidence. Proof that Vernon had threatened her, hurt her, imprisoned her. But as she moved toward the door, she heard footsteps in the hallway. She froze. The footsteps stopped outside the apartment door. A key scraped in the lock. Lucille's mind raced. She couldn't hide. He'd see her. She couldn't escape. The door was the only way out. She stood in the center of the living room, the notebook clutched in her hand as the door swung open. Vernon Talbot stood in the doorway. For a moment, they both stared at each other. Then his eyes dropped to the notebook. "Where did you find that?" His voice was quiet, controlled. "Behind the radio. You broke into my home. Where is she? Where's Dorothy?" Vernon closed the door behind him, locked it, put the key in his pocket. "You shouldn't have come here." Lucille backed toward the window, her heart hammered. "I'm taking this to the police. They'll know what you did." "That notebook doesn't prove anything, just the ramblings of a disturbed woman. My wife had problems, mental problems. She imagined things. The bruises weren't imagined. She was clumsy, fell a lot. Ask anyone, she was always hurting herself." "You're lying." Vernon took a step forward. Lucille gripped the notebook tighter. "Where is she?" she demanded again. "I told you. She went to Cleveland. Her mother's dead. She has no aunt. She has no one. Then maybe she went somewhere else. Maybe she finally left me, like she always threatened to. Women do that, you know. They get ideas in their heads. The wars made them think they don't need men anymore. If she left, why are her clothes still here? Why are her ration stamps unused?" Vernon's jaw tightened. The words hung in the air between them. Vernon stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, bitter sound. Lucille held up the notebook. Vernon took another step closer. Lucille was backed against the window now. He moved fast, faster than she expected. His hand shot out, grabbing for the notebook. Lucille jerked it away,
But he caught her wrist.
his grip was iron. She gasped in pain. __quote_120___. He twisted her arm. The notebook fell from her hand. He released her and bent to pick it up. Lucille didn't think. She just reacted. Her hand closed on the heavy glass ashtray on the windowsill. She swung it. It connected with the side of Vernon's head with a sickening crack. He staggered, dropping the notebook. Blood ran down his temple. __quote_121__. He hissed. He lunged at her. Lucille screamed and swung the ashtray again. This time he blocked it, ripping it from her hands. He threw it aside and grabbed her throat. His hands squeezed. Lucille clawed at his fingers, desperate for air. Her vision began to darken. She kicked at him, but he was too strong. She was going to die. Just like Dot. Just another woman who got in Vernon Talbot's way. Then, suddenly, the pressure released. Vernon stumbled back, clutching his side. Behind him stood the elderly neighbor from upstairs, holding a fireplace poker.
"Get out of here, Vera," Vernon gasped.
"I heard screaming," Vera said. Her voice shook, but the poker didn't. Lucille gulped air, her throat burning. She grabbed the notebook from the floor. She croaked. Vernon turned to face Vera, breathing hard. "Quote, 127 quote, 128 quote, Vera said. Quote, 129 quote, 130 quote, 131 quote. In the distance, a police siren wailed. Vernon looked at the door, at Vera blocking his path, at Lucille still gasping for breath. Then he made his choice. He ran for the window, opened it, climbed out onto the fire escape. Lucille tried to shout, but her voice was a rasp. Vera ran to the window, but Vernon was already climbing down. By the time the police arrived 3 minutes later, he was gone. The search for Vernon Talbot lasted 6 weeks. Police checked train stations, bus depots, rooming houses. His photo was circulated to law enforcement across Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia. But he'd vanished. Meanwhile, Lucille's testimony, the notebook, and the evidence in the apartment led to a formal investigation. Detectives searched the Grant Street apartment top to bottom. They found bloodstains in the bedroom closet, hidden under a throw rug. Fresh paint on the bathroom walls, barely dry. And in the basement of the building, in the coal bin assigned to the Talbot apartment, they found a trunk. Inside the trunk, wrapped in a blanket, was Dorothy Mae Talbot. She'd been dead approximately 6 weeks. Cause of death, manual strangulation. Fractures to the hyoid bone consistent with being choked. Additional injuries, broken ribs, fractured skull, extensive bruising. The coroner estimated she'd died between February 16th and February 18th. Lucille had seen her on February 16th, alive, at the bathhouse. That was the last time anyone saw her alive except her killer. Vernon had let her go to the bathhouse that one last time, probably to maintain the appearance that everything was normal. Then he'd killed her, likely that same night or the next day. Vernon Talbot was charged in absentia with first-degree murder. A warrant was issued, but he remained at large. Until May 7th, 1943. A man matching his description was spotted boarding a freight train in Cumberland, Maryland. Railroad police were alerted. When the train stopped in Hagerstown, they searched it. They found Vernon Talbot hiding in a boxcar. He had a gun, a .38 revolver. When the police ordered him to surrender, he refused. The standoff lasted 4 hours. Negotiators tried to talk him down. Vernon shouted that he wouldn't go to prison, that it wasn't his fault, that Dot had provoked him. Finally, as darkness fell, Vernon turned the gun on himself. He died from the gunshot wound. Dorothy Talbot was buried in Calvary Cemetery on May 12, 1943. The funeral was small. A few neighbors attended. Father Kowalski said the service. Lucille was there, standing in the back. After the burial, Lucille walked to the grave. She placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the fresh earth. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," she whispered, "but I'll make sure what happened to you matters." That night, Lucille opened a new notebook. Not the one Dot had written in. That was evidence, locked away in the police property room. A fresh one, blank pages. On the first page, she wrote, "Dorothy May Sutherland Talbot, born 1918, died February 1943, killed by her husband Vernon Talbot. She came to the bathhouse seeking warmth and safety. I failed to save her. I will not fail the next woman." Then, she started writing down the names of the other women she'd seen. The 3 with bruises who still came to the bathhouse. The ones who flinched at loud voices, who wore long sleeves in summer, who said they fell when they clearly hadn't. She wrote down what she knew about each one, what she'd observed, what she'd heard. And then she made a decision. She would not let what happened to Dot happen to anyone else if she could prevent it. The next Tuesday, when the thin woman with the frightened eyes came in, Lucille approached her. "Excuse me, I don't mean to intrude, but I want you to know, if you ever need help, a safe place to go, you can come to me, day or night. I live at 412 Fifth Avenue, boarding house, room 3. If you need to leave, if you're in danger, I'll help you." The woman stared at her, eyes wide. I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Lucille said gently. "And when you're ready, I'll be there." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, quickly, and hurried away. Lucille made the same offer to the other 2 women. Both reacted with fear, denial. But both, Lucille noticed, didn't tell her to mind her own business. They just left quickly, looking back once before they went. 3 weeks passed. Then, on a Tuesday night in June, there was a knock on Lucille's door. She opened it to find the heavy-set woman standing in the hallway, a suitcase in her hand, a fresh bruise on her jaw. Quote, 140, quote, the woman whispered. Quote, 141, quote, Lucille said. Quote, 142, quote. The woman's name was Helen Kovacs. Her husband worked at the steel mill. He'd been beating her for 2 years. Tonight, he'd threatened to kill her. She'd waited until he passed out drunk, then taken her savings from where she'd hidden it and run. Lucille gave her tea, made up the extra cot in the room, and let Helen cry. "What do I do now?" Helen asked finally. "Tomorrow we'll go to the courthouse, file for divorce. I'll help you find work. There are jobs. The war plants are hiring women. You can support yourself. He'll come looking for me. Maybe, but you won't be alone. I'll help you." Helen stayed with Lucille for 2 weeks while the divorce was processed. Pittsburgh's courts, overwhelmed with wartime cases, moved quickly on domestic matters. Helen's husband didn't contest it, probably relieved to be rid of her. Helen got a job at a munitions factory, found a room in a boarding house for working women, and started a new life. She was the first. Over the next year, 4 more women came to Lucille's door, each one fleeing violence, each one desperate and terrified. Lucille helped all of them. She used her modest savings to pay for temporary lodging, legal fees, bus tickets to other cities where they had relatives. She kept records in her notebook, names, dates, outcomes. She wrote down what help each woman needed, what resources she'd used, what worked and what didn't. By 1944, Lucille had helped 9 women escape abusive marriages. She'd spent nearly all her savings doing it, but she didn't stop. She started asking for help. She approached churches, asking if they had funds for women in need. Some said no. Some said yes. She approached women's clubs, civic organizations, even her local union. Slowly, donations came in. $5 here, $10 there. Not much, but enough to keep going. In 1945, the war ended. Men came home. And with them came more violence. The stresses of readjustment, the trauma of combat, the loss of wartime jobs for women, it all created pressure, and too often, women bore the brunt. Lucille's notebook grew thicker. By the end of 1945, she'd helped 18 women. By the end of 1946, 32. The bathhouse became known, quietly, as a place where women could go for help. Word spread through whispers, through desperate late-night conversations. __quote _147 _. In 1947, Lucille realized she needed more space. She couldn't keep housing women in her single boarding house room. She needed a real shelter. She approached the pastor of First Methodist Church, Reverend Harmon Blake, a progressive man in his 50s who preached about social justice. "I need a building," she told him. "A place where women fleeing violence can stay. Even just a few rooms. Can the church help?" Reverend Blake considered. "How many women are we talking about?" "Right now, I'm seeing maybe 1 or 2 a week. Not all of them need housing. Some just need advice, help with legal papers, money for bus fare. But maybe 1 a month needs a safe place to sleep. The church has an old Sunday school building we're not using. It's in rough shape. But if you can fix it up, you can use it." Lucille visited the building. It was rough, peeling paint, broken windows, a leaky roof. But it had 4 rooms, a small kitchen, and a bathroom. She put out a call for volunteers. To her surprise, dozens responded. Women whose sisters, friends, daughters had been helped by Lucille. Men who'd seen the results of domestic violence and wanted to stop it. Even some veterans who said they'd fought for freedom abroad and wanted to fight for it at home, too. They spent 6 months renovating, painting, repairing, installing new plumbing. In December 1947, the shelter opened. Lucille named it Dorothy's Place, after Dorothy Talbot, a reminder of why this work mattered. The first woman arrived on Christmas Eve. Her name was Ruth, and her husband had broken her arm. She stayed for 2 weeks while her arm healed and she got a job at a department store. Then she moved into her own apartment. By the end of 1948, Dorothy's Place had housed 43 women. Lucille kept her job at the bathhouse. She needed the income, but spent every free hour at the shelter, helping women fill out paperwork, driving them to court hearings, teaching them how to balance a checkbook, how to interview for jobs, how to stand up straight and believe they deserved better. In 1949, a reporter from the Pittsburgh Press heard about the shelter and wrote a story. It ran on the front page of the local section. __quote _154 __. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in. Churches, civic groups, even some local businesses contributed. The shelter was able to hire a part-time counselor, a nurse, a legal advisor. But there was also backlash, angry letters to the editor. Quote, 155, quote, 156, quote, 157, quote. Some men came to the shelter demanding their wives be returned. Lucille called the police every time. Some police were sympathetic. Some weren't. One night in March 1950, a man broke into the shelter while Lucille was there alone. He had a knife. He said his wife was inside and he was taking her home. Lucille stood between him and the stairs to the second floor where the women slept. "You're not going up there. Get out of my way." "No." He raised the knife. Lucille didn't move. They stood like that for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. Then the man heard sirens. A neighbor had called the police. He ran. He was arrested 2 blocks away, charged with breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon. He served 18 months. His wife divorced him while he was in prison and moved to Ohio with her sister. The incident made newspapers again. This time, the story was different. __quote _161 __. More donations came, but also more threats. Lucille started receiving anonymous letters. She kept them all in a folder. Never responded, just kept working. By 1955, Dorothy's place had helped over 300 women. Some had reconciled with their husbands after counseling. Most had left and built new lives. A few had died, killed by the men they tried to escape before reaching the shelter. Lucille kept a separate list of those women. Their names, how they died, when. She read the list every year on the anniversary of Dot's death, a reminder of the cost of looking away. The years between 1950 and 1965 were perhaps the hardest. Lucille was working full-time at the Bathhouse and nearly full-time at Dorothy's place. She slept 4, maybe 5 hours a night. Her boarding house room became an office, filing cabinets wedged next to her bed, stacks of case files on every surface. She developed a system. Each woman who came to her got a file. Name, age, situation, needs. Lucille tracked everything. Where the woman went after leaving the shelter, whether she reconciled with her husband or divorced, whether she found work, housing, safety. Some files were thin, a single page. Woman came, got bus fare to her sister's house in Cleveland, never heard from again. Lucille hoped that meant she was safe, but she couldn't know for sure. Other files were thick, years of documentation. Court appearances, job applications, medical records, housing contracts. Lucille helped with all of it. Filled out forms in triplicate, testified at divorce hearings, wrote reference letters for landlords and employers. One file belonged to a woman named Margaret Chen. She'd come to the Bathhouse in 1951, beaten so badly she could barely walk. Her husband owned a laundry business in Chinatown, respected in the community. No one believed he could be violent. Margaret spoke limited English. Lucille found a translator through a Chinese church. Together, they navigated the divorce process. It took 3 years. The husband fought every step, claimed Margaret was an unfit wife, mentally unstable, a disgrace to their family. But Lucille kept detailed records, photos of Margaret's injuries taken at the hospital. Testimony from the Bathhouse staff who'd witnessed her condition. Medical reports documenting broken bones, internal bleeding. In 1954, Margaret won her divorce. She got a job as a seamstress, eventually opened her own small alteration shop. In 1962, she sent Lucille a wedding invitation. She was remarrying, a kind man she'd met through her church. Lucille attended, cried during the ceremony. Margaret's file was 4 inches thick by the time it was closed in 1963, when she sent Lucille a birth announcement for her first child, a daughter, named Lucy after Lucille. There were stories like that, victories hard-won through years of persistence. And there were stories that ended differently. In 1953, a woman named Patricia Drummond came to Dorothy's place. Her husband was a police officer. He'd been beating her for 6 years. She'd tried to report it once, to his sergeant. The sergeant had laughed. __quote _165 __. Patricia stayed at the shelter for 2 weeks. Lucille helped her file for divorce, got her a job at a textile factory. Patricia seemed hopeful, said she finally felt free. 3 weeks after leaving the shelter, Patricia's husband found her, shot her outside her apartment building, then turned the gun on himself. Both died. Lucille got the call at 3 a.m., went to the hospital. Patricia was already gone. She was 28 years old. Lucille added Patricia's name to the list of women she couldn't save. Number 7. After Patricia, Lucille tried to implement new safety protocols, false names for women staying at the shelter, no records with real addresses, volunteers trained to spot surveillance. But there was only so much she could do. If a man was determined enough, he could find his wife. The fear of that, of opening the door to a woman seeking help, knowing it might not be enough, that fear never left Lucille. But it didn't stop her either. In 1956, a teenager came to the bathhouse. 16 years old, pregnant, bruises on her arms. Her boyfriend, she said. He'd hit her when she told him about the baby. Said it wasn't his. Called her names she wouldn't repeat. Lucille took her to Dorothy's place. The girl's name was Carol. She had nowhere else to go. Her parents had kicked her out when they learned she was pregnant. Carol stayed at the shelter through her pregnancy. Lucille found her a doctor who would treat her for free. Found a maternity home run by nuns that would take her in for the delivery. Carol wanted to keep the baby. Lucille helped her apply for aid, found her a room she could afford once the baby came. Carol gave birth to a boy in February 1957. She named him David. Lucille visited them in the hospital, brought baby clothes donated by church ladies. For 2 years, things seemed good. Carol worked part-time, raised David, appeared to be building a life. Then, her boyfriend found her. Said he wanted to meet his son. Carol, lonely and hoping he'd changed, let him visit. Within a month, he'd moved in. Within 2 months, he was hitting her again. Carol came back to Dorothy's place in May 1959 with David, now 2 years old. This time, she stayed longer, 6 months. Lucille helped her get a restraining order, though they both knew how little that meant. Carol eventually moved to Erie, to a cousin's house. Sent Lucille updates for a few years. Then the letters stopped. Lucille never knew if that was because Carol was finally safe and didn't need to keep looking over her shoulder, or because something had happened. That uncertainty was perhaps the hardest part. The women who left and disappeared into their new lives, Lucille hoped they were happy, safe, thriving. But she couldn't know. And the not knowing gnawed at her. In 1960, Lucille turned 43. She'd been doing this work for 17 years. Her savings were gone, spent on bus tickets and security deposits and emergency medical care. She lived on her bathhouse salary and donations to the shelter. She ate cheap, canned soup, day-old bread, whatever was on sale. She hadn't bought herself new clothes in 5 years. But Dorothy's place was growing. They'd housed over 250 women by then. The shelter had a waiting list. Lucille had to turn women away sometimes, when all the beds were full. Those were the worst nights. Telling a terrified woman, "I'm sorry, we don't have room right now," and knowing she'd go back to the man who was hurting her. Lucille started fundraising in earnest, wrote letters to wealthy Pittsburgh families, spoke at Rotary Club meetings, women's auxiliary groups, union halls. Most people were sympathetic but didn't donate. __quote _167 __, they'd say. Government shouldn't interfere in marriages. But some did help. A steel executive whose sister had been murdered by her husband gave $500. A doctor who'd treated too many beaten women gave medical care for free. A lawyer started handling divorces pro bono. Slowly, the network grew. By 1965, Dorothy's place had a full-time staff of 3, a part-time nurse, and 2 legal advocates. They'd helped over 400 women. Lucille was still working at the bathhouse, still showing up at the shelter whenever she wasn't mopping floors or scrubbing tiles. Her body was failing. Arthritis in her hands made it hard to grip the mop. Her knees ached climbing stairs. She had headaches that lasted for days. Blood pressure, her doctor said, was dangerously high. "You need to slow down," the doctor told her. "I will," Lucille said. "Soon." But she didn't. Because every week, another woman walked into the bathhouse with bruises. And every week, Lucille had to make the choice: say something or stay silent. She always said something. In 1966, she met a woman named Joanne Talbert. Joanne was 52, had been married for 30 years. Her husband had been hitting her the entire time. She'd never told anyone, never sought help, believed it was her fault, her failure, her cross to bear. Then one day she came to the bathhouse and saw a poster on the wall. Lucille had put them up throughout the women's section. Simple text. ___quote _172 ___. Joanne stood in front of that poster for 10 minutes. Then she found Lucille. Quote 173, quote, she said quietly. Quote 174, quote. Lucille helped. Joanne left her husband after 30 years, got a divorce, got a job as a school secretary, lived alone for the first time in her life and loved it. She sent Lucille a Christmas card every year until Lucille died. Always the same message. ___quote _175 ___. That's what Lucille realized over the years. Often, women didn't need someone to rescue them. They needed someone to tell them it was okay to rescue themselves, that they weren't crazy or weak or sinful for wanting to be safe, that they deserved better. Lucille told them that, over and over, hundreds of times. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve a life without fear. It seems simple, but for women who'd been told the opposite their entire lives, it was revolutionary. In 1958, the shelter expanded. A wealthy widow whose daughter had been helped by Lucille years earlier left her entire estate to Dorothy's place. The money allowed them to buy a larger building, hire full-time staff, and establish a network of safe houses across Pittsburgh. Lucille was 41 years old. She'd spent 15 years doing this work alongside her bathhouse job. She was tired, worn down by the constant emergencies, the heartbreak, the violence. But she couldn't stop, because every time she thought about quitting, she remembered Dot, the blood on the bathhouse floor, the fear in her eyes. The last time Lucille saw her, quietly saying, "Fine," before walking out to her death. Lucille hadn't saved Dot, but she'd saved hundreds of others, and that had to matter. In 1968, Lucille retired from the bathhouse. She was 51, and her back couldn't take the physical labor anymore. But she didn't retire from Dorothy's place. If anything, she worked more hours, now that she didn't have the bathhouse job. She trained volunteers. She testified before city council about the need for domestic violence laws. She spoke at churches, community centers, anywhere that would listen. In 1970, Pittsburgh passed its first ordinance allowing police to arrest perpetrators of domestic violence even without a victim's complaint if there was evidence of injury. It was a small step, but it was something. Lucille was there when the ordinance was signed. The mayor thanked her personally. Lucille corrected. By 1975, Dorothy's Place was operating 3 shelters across Pittsburgh, serving over 200 women a year. Lucille was 58. Her health was declining, arthritis, heart problems, the toll of decades of stress. The board of directors suggested she step down, let younger staff take over. Lucille agreed, reluctantly. She became an advisor, showing up a few days a week instead of every day. It was strange having time to herself. She'd spent 32 years in constant motion, always responding to the next crisis. Now, sitting in her small apartment, she felt unmoored. She started writing. Not just the factual records she'd always kept, but memories. Stories of the women she'd helped, the challenges they'd faced, the courage they'd shown. In 1977, a small press published her manuscript as __quote _180 __. It sold modestly but steadily, mostly to social workers, activists, and women's groups. Lucille did speaking tours. She traveled to other cities, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, talking about her work, helping other women start similar shelters. The movement was growing. Across the country, women were opening safe houses, pushing for legal reforms, demanding that domestic violence be taken seriously as a crime. Lucille watched it all with quiet satisfaction. This was what she'd hoped for. Not just one shelter in one city, but a nationwide network of help. In 1985, Lucille suffered a heart attack. She recovered, but it was clear her time was limited. She was 68. She made one final trip to Calvary Cemetery, to Dot's grave. The headstone was simple. Dorothy May Talbot, 1918 to 1943. She deserved better. Lucille placed flowers on the grave, as she'd done every year on the anniversary of Dot's death. "I tried to make it count," she said to the stone. "I hope it was enough." Lucille Whitmore died on March 15, 1988, at age 70, of congestive heart failure. She died at home, in her sleep, peacefully. Her funeral was held at First Methodist Church, the church that had given her the first building for Dorothy's place. Over 500 people attended. Many were women she'd helped over the years. They spoke, one after another, about how Lucille had saved their lives, how she'd given them hope when they had none, how she'd believed in them when no one else did. One woman, Helen Kovacs, the first woman Lucille had sheltered back in 1943, gave the eulogy. She was 70 now, gray-haired, a grandmother. "Lucille Whitmore wasn't a saint," Helen said. "She was better than that. She was a regular person who made an extraordinary choice. When she saw suffering, she didn't look away. She didn't say, 'Not my problem.' She said, 'Let me help.' She saved my life 45 years ago. She saved hundreds of other lives. But more than that, she showed us that one person can make a difference, that you don't have to be powerful or wealthy or important to change the world. You just have to care. And then do something about it." Quote 186. After the funeral, the board of Dorothy's Place announced the shelters would be renamed the Lucille Whitmore Centers for Women in Crisis. By 1995, there were Lucille Whitmore Centers in 12 cities across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. They served over 3,000 women a year. In 1994, Congress passed the Violence Against Women Act, providing federal funding for domestic violence programs. Advocates lobbied to have Lucille recognized in the legislation. Her name appeared in the bill's preamble. __quote _187 __. By 2005, the Lucille Whitmore Centers had expanded to 23 cities. Annual reports showed they'd helped over 75,000 women since 1947. In 2015, a documentary was released, The Bathhouse Keeper: How One Woman Started a Movement. It won awards at film festivals and was shown in schools across the country. In 2020, the city of Pittsburgh dedicated a statue in Point State Park. Bronze, life-sized. A woman extending her hand, as if offering help. The plaque read, "Lucille Whitmore, 1917 to 1988. She opened doors." And still, the work continues. Right now, somewhere in America, a woman is sitting in a bathhouse, or a clinic, or a grocery store, with bruises she's trying to hide. She's terrified. She's trapped. She sees no way out. And somewhere nearby, another woman notices, sees the signs, remembers reading about Lucille Whitmore, or hearing her story, or maybe knows nothing about her but still recognizes suffering when she sees it. And that woman makes a choice. She could look away, pretend she didn't notice, tell herself it's not her business. Or she could do what Lucille did. Approach. Ask, quote 190. That choice happens every day, in every city. Sometimes the answer is quote 191 or quote 192, or a frightened silence. But sometimes the answer is quote 193. And when it is, a door opens. Not just a physical door to a shelter or a safe house, but a door to possibility, to hope, to a different future. That's Lucille Whitmore's legacy, not carved in stone, but lived in actions. In choices made every day by ordinary people who see suffering and decide to help. Dorothy Talbot died in 1943. Lucille Whitmore couldn't save her. But in trying to make that death mean something, Lucille saved hundreds and inspired thousands more to do the same. The door is still open. 45 years of opening doors. Over 400 women helped directly by Lucille herself, many more helped by the shelters she founded. 137 women who found safety and escaped immediate danger through her direct intervention. 11 women who didn't make it to the shelter in time, who died before Lucille could help them. Lucille kept a list of those 11 names. She read it every year, remembered each one, carried their deaths as motivation to help the next woman, and the next, and the next. She wasn't a hero. She said so herself many times. She was just a woman who saw evil and refused to look away, who saw suffering and chose to ease it, who saw closed doors and opened them. That's what heroism really is. Not grand gestures or dramatic rescues, just consistent daily choosing to help when you could choose to ignore. Lucille made that choice every day for 45 years. And because she did, hundreds of women got second chances, got to live lives free from fear, got to raise children in safety, got to become who they were meant to be instead of dying in darkness. In the records at the Lucille Whitmore Centers, there's a file of letters, thank you notes from women who were helped over the decades, from their children, from their grandchildren. Over 200 letters in total. Each one starts the same way. Thank you. Thank you for my life. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for not turning away. Thank you for opening the door. One letter, written in 2023, is from a woman named Dorothy, named after Dorothy Talbot, the woman whose death started it all. The letter reads, Dear Mrs. Whitmore, you never met me. I'm the great-granddaughter of Helen Kovacs, the first woman you helped in 1943. My great-grandmother lived to be 96 because of you. She told me stories about you all through my childhood. She said you saved her life, which meant you saved all of us who came after. I'm alive because you helped my great-grandmother. My mother is alive because you helped my great-grandmother. We exist because you cared. I'm in social work now, working with domestic violence survivors. When it gets hard, when I'm exhausted and discouraged, I think about you. How you did this work for 45 years. How you never stopped caring. How you opened doors. I'm opening doors too now, because of you. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, but thank you. From all of us who exist because you chose to help. That letter hangs framed in the main office of the Pittsburgh Lucille Whitmore Center. Thousands of staff and volunteers have read it over the years. It's a reminder of what this work means, not just helping one woman in crisis, but changing the trajectory of generations, saving not just lives, but futures. Lucille Whitmore saw Dorothy Talbot bleeding on the bathhouse floor in January 1943. She could have looked away, could have pretended she didn't notice, could have told herself it wasn't her problem. Instead, she paid attention. She cared. And when Dot disappeared, Lucille refused to let it go. She investigated, she pushed, she demanded answers. She didn't save Dot, but in the process of trying, in the grief and anger and determination that followed, she built something that saved hundreds of others. That's the real story. Not one dramatic rescue, but decades of quiet persistence, opening doors, offering help, believing women when they said they were in danger, taking action when action was needed. Lucille Whitmore wasn't special. That's what made her extraordinary. She was an ordinary woman, a bathhouse attendant with an 8th grade education, living in a boarding house, earning modest wages. She had no power, no influence, no resources except her own determination. But she had something more important. She had compassion. And she refused to let that compassion be passive. She saw suffering, and she acted. Every day, for 45 years, until her death. That's the legacy. Not monuments or awards or legislation, though those matter too. The real legacy is in the countless quiet moments of help. The The woman who approaches another woman with bruises and says, "I see what's happening. I can help." The volunteer who answers the hotline at 2 a.m., the advocate who sits with a terrified woman in court, the neighbor who calls the police when she hears screaming, the teacher who notices the signs and intervenes, all of them opening doors, all of them continuing what Lucille started. The door can open, or it can stay closed. Lucille showed us it's a choice. Her choice was always to open it. The question isn't rhetorical. It's real. It's happening now, in this moment, somewhere near you. Someone is suffering. Someone could help. That's the challenge Lucille Whitmore left us. Not to admire her from a distance, but to do what she did. To see, to care, to act, to open the door. It's been 36 years since Lucille Whitmore died, but her work continues. Every day. In every city where there's a Lucille Whitmore Center. In every community where someone has learned her story and been inspired to help. The doors are still opening. The question is, who will keep opening them? Lucille's answer was simple. Everyone can. Everyone should. Because every person who suffers deserves help. And every person who can help has a responsibility to do so. That's not heroism. That's just humanity. Lucille Whitmore lived it. For 45 years, every single day. We can too. The door is there. All we have to do is open it. Lucille Whitmore, born June 3, 1917, died March 15, 1988. Lived 70 years. Worked as a bathhouse attendant for 36 years. Helped over 400 women directly. Founded shelters that helped thousands more. Never forgot the 11 she couldn't save. Never stopped trying to save the next one. She wasn't a saint. Wasn't a hero. Was an ordinary woman who made an extraordinary choice. The choice to see suffering and help. Every day. For 45 years. That choice changed hundreds of lives. Saved futures, created possibilities where there had been only darkness. And that choice is available to all of us. Today, now, this moment. When we see someone hurting, we can turn away, or we can stop. When we hear a cry for help, we can pretend we don't hear, or we can answer. When someone knocks on our door, desperate and afraid, we can keep it closed. Or we can open it. That choice defines us. Lucille Whitmore opened doors for 45 years, every single day, until her last breath. And those doors remain open because of her, because of everyone who learned from her, because of everyone who chooses every day to help. The work continues. The doors stay open. And somewhere today, a woman who thought she had no hope will find it. Because someone chose to help. Someone chose to open the door. Just like Lucille did, 45 years ago, and every day since. The door is open. Walk through it. Help someone. Open your door. That's how we honor Lucille Whitmore. Not with statues or plaques, but with action, with compassion, with open doors, every day, starting now. The legacy lives in action, not words. In the shelter worker who stays late to help one more woman. In the neighbor who asks quote 197 when something seems wrong. In the friend who believes, who doesn't judge, who offers help without conditions. Lucille Whitmore showed us the way, not through sermons or slogans, but through 45 years of showing up, of opening doors, of believing women when the world told them they were lying. What made Lucille different was her consistency. 45 years, 15,000 days. How many times did she want to quit? How many nights did she lie awake, haunted by the women she couldn't save? We don't know. She never said. She just kept going. That's the lesson. Not that helping is easy, but that it's worth it anyway. Every door opened, every life saved, every woman who escaped and built a new future. Worth it. All of it. Because people matter. Individual human lives matter. And when we have the power to help, we have the responsibility to use it. Lucille Whitmore understood that, lived it, died believing it. Her doors remain open. The question is, will we walk through them? Will we help the next person who needs it? The choice is ours. Every day, every moment. Open the door.